Hi, this is Michelle Thomas coming to you from Palm Harbor, Florida at Revitalize Health Solutions. I wanted to talk to you today about a subject that is pretty prevalent here in Florida, but in a lot of other parts of the country, and that is mold and mycotoxin exposure. It can make people really sick, and we see a lot of patients here. We've got some really cool treatments. We do IV infusion therapy for people that have been suffering. A lot of patients come to us when they've been other places and are not getting better. My son was also mycotoxin or black mold poisoned and went through the journey with him. He is cured now, and so I want to share a subject today that's just about prevention. This is not about treating, but this is actually just about the prevention of getting mold. So the thing I want to let everybody know is that mold is everywhere. We cannot prevent being around mold. Mold can make some people sick. Mold doesn't make other people sick. We eat mold in food. Mold is good in some instances. Mold is the basis for some antibiotics. So there is mold in the air, there's mold in the environment. What we're talking about today is preventing mold growth from happening in your home. Mold needs an organic source to grow on, such as dirt or debris or dust. And those things we can prevent, or we can do our best to keep our homes free of those. So the idea here that we're going to talk about is what can mold grow on, and what is the medium that enhances mold from growing in your home. Okay, so what we're going to first talk about is keeping your home clean. Keeping your home clean from dirt and dust. We recommend weekly cleaning. So if you've got a vacuum cleaner that has a HEPA filter on it, that's even better. That will help to keep the dust off of things. Things that people don't think about cleaning weekly are curtains, up high, lamps, and ceiling fans. Those things collect dust and dirt, and we don't clean them, and then they spin all night while we're sleeping, and people wonder why they wake up ill in the morning. It's because mold is growing and we're inhaling that as we're sleeping. Just a tip, we never want to store wood or any kind of wood products in the home for heating the home or for any other use, because those items grow mold. We got to think about things like fabrics that need to be cleaned. Again, curtains or bedspreads, wood, sheetrock, anything like that. Those things can all collect dirt and debris, and mold can grow. Weekly cleaning again, and dusting, as well as using an antibacterial on any surfaces that can collect dust. Think about computer screens and laptops. You wanna make sure that those are being kept clean as well. If you do have books to store or things that are older paper type products, you can store them in airtight storage containers, but you also want to make sure that they are ventilated, or that they have an absorbing material gel pack in there so there's not mold growing in those containers. Okay, so I just want to say, remember, this talk is about preventing mold. If you already have mold in the home, if you're suspect that you have mold in the home, you need to have it evaluated, and you need to go to remediation, and that's a different talk. We're just talking about prevention today. So let's talk about moisture. It is suspected that 50% of the buildings in the United States are suspected of having some sort of level of water damage. So there's nothing we can do about buildings that we go into or the places that we work in general. But if it smells moldy and it smells musty, there's probably mold there. Mold can grow within 28 to 48 hours of a building having water damage. So that's a pretty scary thought for there's a rainstorm or something like that. There's some sort of exposure, and within 24 to 48 hours, mold is growing. So just want you to be aware of that. If something gets wet, or if there's something that there's a crack in the wall, we want to address it right away. Water damage does not have to be caused by an obvious leak. It can be caused by things that are roof leaks, or cracks in cement outside, or egresses that are not routed the right way. And exterior of the house is really important to have assessed at least once a year, roof and runoff, to make sure that you are keeping the interior of your house from having leaks behind walls. Correct cracks in the sidewalk and the driveway, even if you think they're outside, they too can lead to problems underneath your house that mold can grow. For those of you that live in colder climates or places that have basements and crawl spaces, it is advised that a vapor barrier in your crawl space, anywhere from 6 milliliters to 20 can provide a moisture barrier from moisture getting into the home. This does help with venting and air exchange. Also make sure that your door frames and your windows are tightly sealed so condensation doesn't get in through the outside. We're going to move next on to air conditioning and the temperature gradients and how mold can grow in these environments. Most people don't know that mold grows between 50 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty much what we live in. 50 degrees outside, maybe going into cars or smaller spaces, cabins, into a room temperature of 70 to even 75 degrees. Mold has the opportunity to grow at those temperatures, even up to 100 degrees for people living in warmer climates. So we want to make sure that we are keeping the doors closed when we're opening the door to go outside so humidity isn't getting in. This was interesting. Most people don't realize that surfaces inside the home, such as countertops or windowsills that are cooler than the air, are places for mold to grow. They cause condensation, sometimes even condensation that you can't see, and mold will begin to grow on those surfaces, which is a lot of times we don't think of why you see mold growing in the cracks of windowsills or in the cracks places, because those surfaces are colder than the air temperature, and that is how those spores begin to grow. Dehumidifiers are great in a home and highly recommended. We want to make sure that we're getting a high quality dehumidifier and that the air temperature is not too cold in the home. We want to make sure that we're not keeping our homes too cold so that those levels of the surfaces in the windows are growing that condensation. We need to make sure that the dehumidifiers are being cleaned minimally once a month, and that they're being cleaned with an antibacterial soap, and that they are not clogged up. If they are running, the humidity should be in the home above 60%. We want to make sure that any sort of insulated materials that you're using to block under the door from a draft or in a windowsill, that it is not a cellulose-based product. That's a food source for mold. So wouldn't that be great if you use something to block the condensation coming in and the mold was eating it for breakfast? So the basement and crawl spaces, we do need to make sure that there is a dehumidifier in there that is appropriate for the size of the crawl space or the basement. Sometimes someone will put a dehumidifier in an area. It doesn't cover the whole area, so it is a moot point. So make sure that you know the size of your dehumidifier to the square footage of the area that you're trying to keep cold. Dehumidifiers will also help with water-laden areas. So if you've got something in the garage that's connected to the house and it's very hot or very humid, that can also help with the humidity getting into the house. The reservoir in the bottom should be cleaned at least once a week. So you clean the unit once a month, but you clean out the pan in the bottom once a week so you don't have standing water, and that is at the least. You can change it every day if you wanted to. We want to think about areas that have higher humidity than others, so places like kitchens and bathrooms. Every room should have a ventilated area in it. We want to make sure that we've got a fan, as well as if you're in an area, an apartment that you can't control or a home that you can't control that doesn't have a ventilation system, you want to make sure that you have a dehumidifier that is specifically designated for that area to keep the mold out. You also want to make sure that vents are not blocked. So those vents are recirculating that air, and you want to make sure that those vents are never blocked or closed. Air circulation can assist in evaporation and may also help you with mechanical removal of moisture, in addition to the air conditioning units and the dehumidifying units. This was interesting too. I know us women like to stuff our closets filled, but when you don't have circulation in a closet, and typically a closet doesn't have a circulatory system or a dehumidifying system or a vent in a closet, mold can actually grow in our clothes, in our shoes, and so we want to make sure that we are not overstuffing our closets, and anything such as purses, we want to make sure that we're not storing them with any type of hand sanitizers or lotions or things in there that could potentially lead to having more humidity going on. Just remember, if you think that you have mold in your home or if you are becoming ill or family members are becoming ill and they're suspect of mold, you've got to have it evaluated. So none of the tips and tricks that I've given you today are for remediation. They're not for after diagnosis of mold. They're all preventative. So anybody listening to this, if you want to start out at a baseline, have your home evaluated for mold. When you're on a clean slate, then do all these things to prevent mold. Okay, now we're going to pick up with air filtration. How should you filter the air that's in your home? There's a couple of different options that can be confusing. It's called a HEPA filter. It stands for Highly Efficient Particulate Arrestance Filters. So what this means is that these are filters that go in your home. They're air purifiers, but they have different types of filters on them that can remove 99.97% of the particulates in the air that are dangerous. This is very, very tiny, and there are a couple of things that can get through these filters, such as mycotoxins, and mycotoxins are the ones that actually make you sick. So why should you bother getting a filter if you're going to get mycotoxins anyway? So here's what you do. What you do is you get one, and you have to make sure that it's clean. So you make sure that the filter is clean so that the particulates continue to go through. You make sure that there's no blocking of the filter, and each filter has its own cleaning recommendations, but you want these particulates to go through this HEPA filter as much as possible. A dirty filter will decrease the airflow through the filter and move the air toward the path of least resistance, which is back out into your air, and this can actually make matters worse. There's some units that use chemical and charcoal filters, and these remove the impurities. There's other filters that become saturated, and those aren't good either. Those are the lesser costing units. You want to make sure that if you're getting a HEPA filter with the charcoal, you're getting a really good unit. The other newer purifiers are the ion generators. They use a photocatalytic process which breaks down the subsized particles so that you don't have to clean a charcoal filter. Some units even offer a HEPA filter and a photocatalytic system, which is ideally the best. I know that they're expensive, but if you wanted the best of both worlds, that's the way you would go, would be a dual system. I want to just talk briefly on if you think that you may have had mold exposure, mycotoxin exposure, and everybody in your family isn't exposed. If it doesn't always make sense. Some people get symptoms worse than others. I do want to let you know that epigenetics play a part into it, and some people do have an easier time fighting off with their immune system these mycotoxin exposures, and so it doesn't mean that if everybody isn't sick that you don't have mold in the house. So just to clarify that. Sometimes I've had families where there's 6 people in the family, and 2 people are really, really sick, and everybody else is just having little headaches or things, and nobody's really thinking anything of it until the 2 people are really, really sick. You could very much so have mold in the home. So I'm just going to name some of the things that come on when people have mold exposure, or they have what's called mycotoxin illness, which means they're having ongoing exposure. These things can come on suddenly, or they can be very vague, or over a couple months, or even over a year. But people can start having eczema, skin issues. They can have itchy eyes, watery eyes, congestion, newly frequented sinus infections, fatigue is a big one, headaches, nausea, constipation, diarrhea. They can have anxiety and depression that they never had before, and you don't know where that may have come from. Some OCD-like symptoms, focusing in on things that don't really make sense that they're really focused on. Insomnia, cough, trouble with memory, and just kind of trouble doing daily tasks that they normally would not have had a problem with. Some numbness and tingling, night sweats, some kind of hormonal feeling things that really don't have anything to do with hormones per se. Lightheadedness. Some people develop autoimmune disorders, neurological complaints, and frequent sicknesses, such as you think something's wrong with your immune system. So I'm just mentioning these things just so they don't become overlooked. The idea of this was prevention of mold, but I just want to let you know that if you do feel like you've had exposure to black mold or have some sort of mycotoxin or respiratory exposure, please give us a call. Reach out at Revitalize Health Solutions. We're in Palm Harbor. We do Zoom visits all over the country, all over the world, and we'd be glad to help you and talk about your particular situation.